Okay, welcome to the After the Sermon podcast, where we take time each week to dive in a little bit deeper to our sermon text this morning. My name is Ross, and I'm here with
Justin.
Awesome. And this week we are going to be following up from our sermon, from Justin's sermon in Matthew chapter 23, where we...
Hey, every sermon is our sermon.
Every sermon is it's collective.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody owns everything.
Yeah, but I do the most of the work.
Yeah. But I'll take credit for your work.
Hey, thanks, man.
So, yeah, cool, awesome. Matthew chapter 23. After I was interrupted, Matthew 23, 7 woes to the Pharisees, and as Justin pointed out on Sunday, the Pharisees were particularly condemned. We saw for two things: for their pride and for their position. So they were in a position of authority and a position of leadership. And then they used that position to place unnecessary burdens and to puff themselves up, to bolster themselves up. And we saw one of the points that you made, Justin, that I thought we were kind of talking before this, that we kind of really wanted to dive into, is that pride often manifests itself in a couple different ways, and at least in one of two different ways. Firstly, we saw the kind of pride that the Pharisees were so wrapped up in, the pride of hypocrisy, the pride of showmanship, the pride of puffing themselves up and manufacturing an image in front of everybody in order to capitalize and monopolize on their position, their power, and authority in their society and in their day. But there's also another kind of pride, and you kind of call that insecure pride. So would you, maybe we could take a couple minutes to talk about what is insecure pride and how is that different from arrogant pride?
Yeah, so one of the ways it's been helpful for me to think about pride is a two-sided coin, as opposed to a one-sided coin or a three-sided coin. That'd be one kind of a coin. But on the one side is arrogance, and on the other side is insecurity. And I got my phone up here. Don't worry, I'm not playing Angry Birds. But I would say in general, I like to think of pride as a preoccupation with self. So pride is I'm making myself the center of at least my universe, not God. Yeah. Now, within that, I would say arrogance is thinking too highly of myself. So, I am so spiritual or I am so smart, whereas insecurity, the other side of it, would be thinking often too lowly of myself. I'm not good enough. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not smart enough. And so, whereas arrogance would say I'm the best, insecurity would say I'm the worst. Yeah. But either way, you're thinking about yourself too much.
Yeah. Man, that's a super helpful, even just me, I don't know if I've heard you articulate it quite like that, and that's super helpful for me to think about. Arrogance being thinking too highly, insecure pride being thinking too lowly. And either way, we're concerned and consumed with ourselves. And on one hand, we act offensively like the Pharisees did. We're grasping for power and show. But on the other side, when we're overcome with insecure pride, we're reacting. We're doing things to defend ourselves from being exposed.
Exactly.
For what we think we are. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so why do you think that insecure pride is so dangerous? I think in a lot of ways that maybe our culture, we've been trained to hate or reject the arrogant pride of the Pharisees, or whether or not we grew up in the church or not, we grew up being told, don't be like the Pharisees. Everyone in our culture hates religiosity and religious hypocrisy, but we're all, I think, tempted. We're all still struggle with pride. Nobody here is saying that we're immune to that. So why do you think that insecure pride is so dangerous?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. One of the reasons we wanted to talk about this in this podcast, a lot of people, when they hear the words like, I want to sit on the throne, or I want to make it all by myself, I want to be in the spotlight, a lot of people are going, no, I don't. Like, I don't want people to look at me. I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want to be in charge. Like, I actually don't think I do good at any of that. I think for a lot of us, we're actually dealing with the insecurity side of pride more than the arrogant side. And part of what, I liked how you worded the question, what makes it so dangerous. And part of that, we always say the best lies are the ones that are the closest to the truth, just the slightest twist. And so really, another way I think to call insecurity would be false humility. Whereas the opposite of the true opposite of pride is humility.
Yeah.
This poses as a humility, but really it's a false one. And I think that's because, it's C.S. Lewis's line, true humility is not thinking of yourself less, or not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less.
Yeah.
So thinking of myself less would be godly, right? To
Yeah.
get my eyes off myself, put them on God and other people. Whereas thinking less of myself is insecurity, and I would say that's satanic in the sense of it is from Satan. It is sinful to still be making it all about myself. And so I think for a lot of us, we can get sucked into that, not realizing that there's still a sin issue there, even though I'm not saying how awesome I am or how much I want to be, whatever, lifted up by other people.
Yeah, for sure. So we're basically calling God a liar.
Exactly.
By thinking inappropriately less of ourselves. We're saying, actually, God, what you created, what you did here was not really that great, and what Satan's telling me is actually true. Yeah, that's so good. I think there's also an aspect in which it's dangerous because by living out of falseness or insecurity, we're actually hurting other people who maybe there's other people who would benefit from us stepping up or serving or sticking our neck out in some way or leading in some way. And by saying, I'm not the person for that, or that's not really my strength, or that's not really my gifting, or I don't want to be in front of everybody getting all the attention, we're actually robbing someone else of the opportunity from being blessed by the way that the Spirit has gifted us. So I think of like Saul in 1st and 2nd Samuel, who kind of hides behind his position of authority, and when Samuel calls him out on that, after he fails to do what God has told him to, when he's waging war against the Amalekites, and he doesn't fully fulfill what he's been called to do, Samuel calls him out on that, and he basically says, look, who am I? I'm just one guy. I can't stop the whole people. And Samuel says, no, you're the king. You by failing to own up to your responsibility as king with this kind of guise of false humility, you're actually hindering and leading a lot of people astray and into sin itself. So, so I think in addition to kind of promoting a satanic version of reality, we're also hurting other people within the body of Christ. So,
So don't be a Saul. Get out of the luggage rack.
Totally. Cool. All right. So next question for you. What would you say? I think we all know the signs of an arrogant person. Like, if you've ever met an arrogant person, you know it, right?
Why do you keep looking at me?
Well, we're just, no reason. So, we all know, Jesus calls out the Pharisees for the kind of clothing and the symbolism that they did. He earlier in Matthew talks about people who pray long, flowy, self-righteous prayers. We know self-righteousness and hypocrisy when we see it. Sometimes the signs of insecure pride are maybe harder to detect. But what would you say are some of those signs of insecure pride?
Yeah, I think this is helpful for people who are thinking, well, I don't know if that's actually me or not, or still struggling to try to define this. And so as I was thinking this through, and certainly, I can see almost all of these in myself at times, some signs running these diagnostics, fear, anxiety, or panic. I think that a lot of times an insecure person is afraid of failure. And so you kind of have this idea of, I can't do it. Yeah. And so when there is the potential of that, there's fear. So kind of with that would be hiding. I don't want to be found to be a failure or to be lacking.
Yeah.
So kind of like we were just talking about with Saul, I'm going to hide. He literally hid in the luggage rack.
Yeah.
So if I can just get out of sight, then I won't be exposed. Paranoia. Oftentimes an insecure person thinks that everybody else thinks the same way about them. And, it's like there's a people over there talking. They must be talking about me, and it must not be very good. So we always are just thinking other people are joining in on that failure party. I'd say shame would be another one that when people point something out in me that is bad, or I even think they might be thinking that or are going to say that, there's just we're just very ready to heap that shame on ourselves or assume that people are going to do that. And I think with that and sort of preventative preventative measures would be blame shifting. When people want to call me out, I'm going to now, instead of hiding, I'm going to kind of defend myself out of insecurity. So I'm going to say no, and I'm going to blame shift it on a circumstance, or somebody else. I'm going to make excuses. I'm going to argue with them. That'd be kind of the other form of hiding. And then I would say something else that insecure people do a lot, it would be to make other people feel insecure as well. So if I'm so lowly, maybe arrogant to say I'm going to climb above you, but insecurity says I'm just going to drag you down in the mud with me. Yeah. And so we'll just all stink together. And finally, I was thinking we like to then showcase our accomplishments. So if the insecure person is afraid of being found lacking or inadequate, then I'm going to try to really put forward the things that I've done well. And I think especially for the insecure person, this will come more in the form of what the kids call humble brags. And so we will subtly
teach us.
Yes. So I will. You'll see this on Facebook, where someone's like, being a mom is so hard. Like always sacrificing so much for my kids. Really, what's the subtext there? Look at me, validate me, but it's going to be a less direct way than the arrogant person.
Yeah. That's so good. I identify too much with multiple of those things, especially the shame thing about being exposed exposed in front of others for who we really are, admitting and knowing, hey, we're not as good as we should be, we're not as competent as we should be, or we feel like we should be. And so by shrinking back or failing to step in or step up, we are protecting ourselves from that shame in front of others. Yeah, totally. I think another way for me is I know when I'm operating out of insecure pride when I fail to call sin, either in myself or in other people. Because if I were to even gently confront someone else, that's again, you're sticking your neck out. There's a lot of risk involved in there. And if I'm wrapped up in, okay, how are other people going to perceive me? Am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be called a hypocrite? Am I going to be called, a prude or something for calling this out? If I'm consumed with how are other people going to respond to this, rather than knowing what is right and knowing what I ought to do and then failing to do that, that's a sign that I'm not operating out of my security in Christ, but my insecurity in my own self.
It paralyzes you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure. All right, so we talked a lot about insecure pride. And its signs, it's the danger, kind of how it shows up in our society and it kind of shows up in our lives. How would you say then, what hope is there, right? What hope? How does the gospel speak to insecure pride that we all struggle with, or many of us at least struggle with?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I'm glad we're ending on a high note, because so far it's been kind of a depressing topic. But we need it, right? We need to see this. And I want to say, a couple of things. Starting by actually validating the insecure person, in the sense that we do live in a fallen world, and we have a lot of reasons to be insecure. And we've been hurt by other people. Yeah. We have past hurts and failures, and sometimes those are things that are externally brought on us. Yeah. So we're not attempting here, because it could come across like you're just heaping more shame on the insecure person. Just here's another thing to be insecure about, is my own insecurity. And insecurity is actually accurately, in a lot of ways, seeing our own failures and inadequacies as humans, right? So it's not so much that we're not seeing our problem correctly, but insecurity does not adequately address the solution.
Yeah.
Because what insecurity is trying to do is either hide the failure, make excuses about the failure, wallow in the failure, pretend there is no failure, or just try to improve the failure. That's still all a reference point from self. Yeah. And I would say that where the arrogant person needs to be humbled, the insecure person needs confidence. And the beautiful thing is the gospel does both. For the arrogant person, it addresses, here's the standard fool, you have fallen short. But for the one who is struggling with that, there is a confidence, but it's not a self-confidence. It's in another person. And, the gospel says that we're all failures, but that Christ dealt with that failure by coming to earth, living a life of never failing on our behalf, dying for the punishment of our failure before God, defeating that failure when he nailed it to the cross, and then rising in that new resurrection life to give us his never failing life. And that's what we can claim. And so, I was thinking about Paul, like we have a confidence in 2 Corinthians 3. And I love this. And sometimes you're almost like unsettled by the confidence and of the disciples. Sometimes like, who do you think you are? But I feel they know who they are. And that's the whole thing. In 2 Corinthians 3:4, he says, such is the confidence that we have through Christ toward God. Yeah. So it's not myself, it's him. Not that we are sufficient in ourselves to claim anything as coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God, who made us sufficient to be ministers of the new covenant. So we have this job, and we are sufficient to do it, not in ourselves, but in who Christ is. And so I think the beautiful truth of the gospel, it's not, for the insecure person, it's not, think better of yourself. Like, this isn't self-help. This isn't that stinking thinking. It's don't even think about yourself at all. Like, that's the call of the gospel. Think about Jesus. Think about how perfect, how powerful, how faithful he is, and then go in that confidence that you are great. Not that you're great and capable, but that he is. Yeah. And so now we can have this audacious confidence. And so Jesus, I would say it this way: Jesus defeats our insecurity, and then he positively gives us all the security we need. Yeah. And that's how the gospel addresses it.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. That's such a good word to end on. The gospel helps us own the truth of our hopeless reality and the truth of our sin and shame. That is real. Provides a substitute, a worthy substitute, and then makes us sufficient, as you said, as we behold and think on Jesus, who defeats and provides all that we need. That's good. Let's go beholding and rejoicing in that Jesus and that gospel today. Thanks, Justin. We'll see you guys.
Bye-bye.